Well, in this series of answering questions, I would like to give the other 2 or 3 occasions where fear overcame me in a real life situation. Having described the lion situation, I would now like to describe a snake situation. These are true tales of my African adventures. May this inspire you, deter you, caution you, and above all, entertain you. Now, generally speaking, I have no fear at any time, under any circumstance, when it comes to snakes. No matter what situation I've been in, I have never experienced fear, except, so I shouldn't say never, but except on 2 occasions. But the one occasion was a particularly awkward and very, very dangerous situation. Now, when it comes to exotic snakes, now, if you're in Africa and a snake comes from another country, it's an exotic snake. And we don't always have antivenom, which is produced specifically for some of the exotic snakes that we have in our collections. And we certainly did not have King Cobra antivenom. And although our antivenoms may well have had some impact on the toxicity of the King Cobra, I can't be sure. And in any case, the King Cobra, although its venom is not that potent drop for drop compared to some other cobras, it injects such a massive amount of venom that it can even kill an elephant. So what would happen to a lowly human being of my size if it can actually kill an elephant? Now, King Cobras are not always aggressive. Very often they're quite easy to handle. And although they put up quite a show and make a big fuss and spread a hood and stand with a hood high, proud in the air like this, you can actually quite easily handle them. So I had one which I raised. This one originally came from Thailand, but I was unlucky in that this was the worst tempered King Cobra ever known by man. It was just downright terrible. It was almost as if it was intending to kill somebody its whole life. Every time it saw somebody, it would come straight at you, straight at the glass. It would stand up, it would partly open its mouth, it would hiss, a low, deep hiss, and then rush and so on towards you. Terrible snake. I had that thing for many years, and I raised it from less than a meter to just over 14 feet. 14 feet is a big snake. It's a lot of reptile. Anyway, we built it a new enclosure one day. It was a nice enclosure, and we landscaped it pretty well. And King Cobras eat only snakes, other snakes, and so we used to rely on the locals in the surrounding area to bring us roadkill, snake roadkill, which was in abundance, unfortunately. Anyway, these would get frozen, and once every 2 weeks or so we'd defrost quite a large reptile, a snake, and he would munch that. And then 6 to 8 days later, there would come the feces, which were copious, being a big snake. Now, to take him out, to clean the enclosure was a big drama. But we discovered something. If we threw a sack over him, I don't even know how we discovered this, it kind of happened one day. If we threw a sack over him, then he would curl up all nice and snug and just stop moving, and he would feel terribly happy about that. So he would lie under his blanket, this big sack, quietly, and we could get into the enclosure and move about. And what happens generally with snakes is that if they're safe, if they feel that they're well camouflaged and they feel they're safe, they won't move. If they're in hiding, something is covering them, they're in a hole, A snake won't rush out of a hole and bite you. If he's safe in his hole, he'll stay there. So that was the syndrome. He's safe under his safety blanket, his sack, and he stayed there. And so for ages and ages, we were able to get in and move about without a difficulty. Most unusual for him, because being the maniac he was, I would have expected different. But I wasn't wrong in the end. So we used to go in and do the cleaning of the enclosure, because no other staff were allowed near him. Otherwise, I'd be replacing staff all the time, if you know what I mean. And all the exotic snakes with very potent venom, especially the bad-tempered ones, no staff were allowed near them. We had to take that responsibility on ourselves. So the day came when it was my turn to clean, and I went there, did the sack trick, threw the big sack in on top of him, and he snuggled up underneath it, and that was great. So what I would do is go in quietly initially, stand there for a short while, make sure he's definitely settled under his sack and that he's not going to move about a bit, look at a couple of things, etc., see that there's absolutely no movement whatsoever, and then I would feel satisfied that I could proceed. And on this particular day, there were some droppings. They're big droppings, and on one part of the enclosure, and some droppings closer to the door. So I had a brush, a firm brush with a pan to brush the droppings into. So I got down on hands and knees, and then balanced myself on my knees and began to brush the droppings, because they kind of sticky on the concrete landscaped floor, brush them into the pan. While I was busy doing this, some movement caught my eye, and I turned around, and my heart just about leapt right into my mouth. Whilst I was busy trying to get this dropping off the ground, the snake, now for the first time, and which I thought he would, had come out from underneath the sack, and it raised his head and neck up about 1.20 meters or 1.30 meters above the ground, which is way above the crouching position I was in on my knees. And he started his hissing and partly opening his mouth and pulling his spread hood backwards and pushing the underbody forward a bit in a threatening position. And I thought, I'm gone. I can't, there's nothing I can do. And he will bite, because he always did. There wasn't a time he didn't try to bite. He will bite. And he's going to bite and strike towards my mid-body, back. And I had a flimsy shirt on. It was summer, it was hot, so this was very light material. Bite me on my back, my arm towards the shoulder, the back of my neck, my head, somewhere around there. And he would hold on, because he never let go when he bit a thing. That's not the snake. He didn't think that was a good idea. If he bit something, he stuck to it. He would bite me and inject so much venom, I didn't think I would even get to the front door of the institute. So I had to think fast. Now, when I say fast, split second thinking, because the strike was coming, and I knew it was going to come then. At that moment, it was going to come. So I shot up. I don't know what made me do it, where I did it, and how I did it, but I spiraled up from facing away from him. I spiraled upwards so that I was facing towards him on my feet. And as I was doing that, the strike came, as I expected. And he smacked his face on the ground where I was a second ago. And then he was really mad. He didn't have any blood or anything, you know, he was a tough old boy. But now I was in the corner. And he came up again, and he started pulling his hood back and partly opening his mouth and pushing his underbody towards me again for the second strike. And I jumped to the one side. It was to the left. He struck, didn't hit the ground this time. Then he struck again, and I had to jump back into the position I was. And I thought, I can't keep this up because there's not enough space in here. It's going to get me sooner or later. So I offered my boot, but he could easily have bitten higher up than the boot. But I offered my boot, and he grabbed it. And he grabbed it so that the fangs went right into the leather, but didn't penetrate deep enough to reach my foot. And the venom came pouring out of the mouth because he was injecting it now, but the discharge orifices of the fang were just above the leather. And this venom was running into the side of the boots where the stitching was. And the sole created a bit of a lip all the way around and was running down the lip and pouring onto the concrete, and there was a pool of venom. I tell you, it would have filled the bottom of a teacup. So much venom was coming out, and I looked at it in awe. And he just would not let go because he thought, after all these years, finally he got me. And having succeeded in his quest, he was not going to let go. It was a long-suffering quest to get me, and he's now gotten me. And I'm sure to himself, with his mouth clamped to my boot, he was chuckling to himself that I knew I'd get him in the end. So I shuffled to the door with him still hanging on my boot, and as I got to the door, I kicked him off. And he was forced to let go, and he was flung backwards a little bit. And I leapt out the door and slammed it shut, and I stood there shuddering. That day, I know I would have died. Hey, by the way, I do have Patreon, so you can join me there too.